Okay, so today I'm going to present you a new data sharing model that Idrix has proposed and what we call the data sharing federation model. So why a new model? Well, I mean, since the needs of data user, data subject, data provider, and regulator have dramatically increased in the last 15 years. And we need now a new model to address their needs. So what are these needs? So regarding the data user, we are mainly physicians, scientists. They need to process high amount of biomedical and genetic data, in particular when they work in personal medicine or system medicine, system biology. And often they have to reuse this data for scientific research purposes. However, often this secondary this reuse is not covered by the initial consent. Moreover, the reuse is neither, is still dependent on the national data protection laws, and these laws are not yet harmonized, at least under the directive, and they are still highly dependent on the approval of ethical and data access committees. And for all these reasons, their need for efficient, seamless, and quick data sharing processes across organizations and countries are not met yet. So regarding the data providers, who are mainly the research centers and hospitals, they want to reduce their risks and burden when they share data. So often their limited resources do not allow them to handle data use requests of data users in a quick and seamless manner. They still need to set a data access committee that will review the request, and they still need to set a material transfer agreement that need to be signed. So there is a kind of lengthy and resource demanding process here. Moreover, very often there is no technical means, times, and resource to control that the data user is compliant. And this put their reputation at risk if there is a data breach. And this is one of the reasons why there is still some resistance to transfer data outside of their system, the secure system. The second point is they want to be rewarded if their contribution, for their contribution to data sharing. As you know, providing high quality data, and now we say fair data, requires resource and is an intensive work. And currently there is no systematic rewarding mechanism between data user and data providers. So regarding data subjects, that is really I would say the most important thing, because all these requirements, or most of these requirements, are now in the regulation. The data subjects, that are mainly patients, they want to be engaged in research, and in particular in data sharing processes. They want their right on their data to be broadened and strengthened. They want the security measure to be increased in order to reduce the risk of re-notification and data breach. They want data processing to be transparent, so which means that all data processes are declared, traceable, and auditable. And finally, they want reciprocity between data user and data subject, so which means that they want to be informed when their data contributed to research processes. Regarding the regulators, the aim is to establish a fair balance between the science and the society needs. And they want scientific practice to be compliant with the requirements of the protection of data and data subject rights. So even if this strong, let's say, data protection legislation brings more constraint on data user and providers, we should not forget that strong legislation also contributes to build trust between all the stakeholders. And trust is a prerequisite to have a high data sharing. So, that is why the regulator, since the last years, defined a new regulation, I mean the European General Data Protection Regulation that they described a bit. And here I will describe it very briefly, but this regulation is much more expanded compared to the directive, and it will be effective, yes, in 1 year. And unlike the directive, it covers data processing for secondary and scientific research purposes. It broadens and strengthens also the rights of the data subjects and increases the privacy and security measures. In the next slides, I would like to spend a bit of time to show you with few examples of what the requirements of the regulation has an impact on our current organizations. One of them, and David mentioned that, is for the regulation clarify the definition of personal data. And here I try to summarize based on the Article 4 and Article 26, data that are rich enough to single out a natural person are personal data. As you know, high dimension data are very rich data, so they are very likely personal data, implicitly. The second point is, we know from previous studies that it's impossible, nearly impossible, to anonymize high dimension data without losing the utility, which means that repositories of high dimension data with control data access very likely host personal data according to the regulation. Another article described, and it's very important for us, scientists, for research, and in medicine also, personal data concerning health and genetic data are special category of data, of personal data. We can call that sensitive data. And their processing depends on the data protection law of member states. And also, the member states, as David mentioned, have the possibility to increase the restriction of the processing of this sensitive data. And this Article 9 has several consequences. First, and this is very important, there is still, even under the regulation, there is still no harmonization of the national data protection law regarding the genetic and biomedical data that are 99% of our data that we want to use for research and medicine. So, and this implies that there will still, the data sharing will remain inefficient across countries if we do not change our procedure of data sharing and our infrastructure in Europe. Any organization that processes personal data, including hosting, must implement technical and organizational measures that protect the rights of the data subject. This is Article 25. And one of the rights of the data subject, is to object to the processing of their data. Okay, it's stated in Article 21. Okay. So which means there's a consequence of these two articles. One, that any organization that can to process personal data for scientific research purposes must address the right of the data subject to object. Which means that data subject must be contacted at each time data user requests a processing of their personal data. In other words, we should have a system or a new infrastructure, an ecosystem that maintains the communication between data subject, data provider, and data users at any time when the data provider hosts personal data. With this a few examples, I show you in the previous slides that in fact the several needs of the stakeholders and also the requirements, at least some requirements of the regulation need to be addressed if we want to have efficient data sharing across organizations and countries. To do this, we need to change our way to share data, at least to change our model of data sharing. And that is why Matrix has proposed a new data sharing model that we have called data sharing federation. So, of course, the aim of this data sharing federation is to lower the barrier to data sharing by facilitating and speeding up the data sharing across countries and organizations while complying with the European regulation and national data protection laws. It also aims to reduce the risk and the burden of the data sharing and to engage and reward all the stakeholders. So to achieve these objectives, the overall structure of the data sharing federation should be as presented here. In fact, it's a federation of national federated systems. Each country has its own federated system. And this federated system has several elements. So, the blue one, the blue circle represents the server, represent the data brokers. The brown represent the data providers, and the red represent the platform of the data subjects. And each of these elements has specific roles in the national federated system. So the data broker, in fact, have a unique connecting point between the national federated systems through which the data are transferred. They also host only analysis results on their related data for a limited period of time, again to be compliant with the regulation. And they should provide computing power and tools for performing queries and analysis. And very importantly, they should control and support data privacy and security compliance at the national level. The data providers, they host clean, standardized, and pseudonymized data. They provide also computing power for performing queries and analysis. And they control, very importantly, they control the data uses based on the data subject's decisions. And the data subject decision, in fact, is coming from the platform, the data subject platform. So this platform informs the data subject of the data use request, and they transmit their decision, the decision of the data subject, to the data providers. They have also the role to host and manage data subjects' contact and consent information, and to enable dynamic consent. Finally, for the data user, there is there is a unique entry point for the data user in order to register, query, analyze, and visualize their analysis results. And this unique point is the portal of data sharing federation. One point I would like to highlight is I speak about the burden in the data provider. In this model, we reduce the burden on the data provider because, in fact, in this model, the provider, each of the providers, in fact, deal with only one data broker. So in terms of dealing with material transfer agreement, dealing with compliance, etc., with the data user, in fact, the only trusted third party is the data broker. Okay. It also reduces the burden because all the information regarding contact information, consent information is not anymore taken care by the data provider, but is taken care by the data subject platforms. Okay, so in terms of information flow, how it would work? So let's assume that we have a user who is based in country 1. The first thing that he needs to do, of course, is to register. To register, he needs, of course, to provide some personal information, which organization he or she works, where he's based, email address, etc., things like that. Okay. When the register is done and there is an authentication, so verification that this user really exists and is what he claims to be, then he needs also to sign a data use agreement with the federation. And among the terms of data use, there is one that is very important for the rewarding process, is the data user would accept, and will accept if he signs the agreement, will accept that the data provider will be co-author of any publication where the data that he used for the analysis come from this data provider. Okay. So after registering, then he can also do a query or an analysis. Of course, to do this, he needs to define the analysis parameter, and this analysis information will be sent to the data broker of the country of the user, in this example, the country 1. So let's call this data broker, the parent data broker. Okay. This parent data broker sends the analysis information to the data providers of the country 1, but also to the brokers of the other countries. And there is a data broker will send this analysis information to the data provider of their own countries. Only some of these data providers will have the data needed for the analysis, and if these data are personal data, and if the use of this data is not covered by the consent, the initial consent, then a data use request will be sent to the data subjects through the platform of the data subjects. The data subjects then can reject or not, can object or not the data use. So they send back their decision to the data providers, and if the data subject didn't object to the use of their data, then either the data is analyzed locally in the server of the data providers, or in some cases, the data are transferred to the parent data broker where all the collected data are analyzed. And the analysis result is sent to the portal of the data sharing federation where the user can visualize it. Very importantly, compared to the current data use model or data access model that we are in Europe but also in the US, at least most of them. In this model, in any case, the data user cannot have a copy or export the data that has been used for the analysis. It can show, it can export the aggregated data, so the analysis results, but it cannot have the individual data on its own computer or server. Okay. And this is a very important point for avoiding, again, data breach, at least a risk of data breach. Okay, so I show you very briefly that this model is quite unique compared to the current model, because the organizational and the structure and the overall structure allow to have an open data sharing, since any registered data user can query and analyze data across countries. It allows you to have a quick authorization of data use with a minimum intervention of data access committees. They are compliant by default and by design and meet the requirement of GDPR, the regulation, and the National Data Protection Laws by protecting the rights as you of the data subject. As you may notice, there is no break of information flow between the data user and the data subject. They reduce the risk of data breach at its minimum level by strengthening the security measure. They reduce the burden on the data provider, as I explained. They provide also a rewarding mechanism between data providers and data subject, and they harmonize data protection procedure across country, at least at the operational level. Regarding its implementation of this model, because it's still a model. Okay? In terms of feasibility of its implementation, its implementation is technically feasible since we leverage on the existing and running elements, organizations, and infrastructure that are in US or in Europe. I just listed here very few examples, such as, for example, the data federation technology of Bioman that exists since more than 10 years now. There are also some what we call data safe events that have been put that are up and running in USA, but in UK, for example, you have I think it's based in UK. You have a platform, the portal, the clinical data study request, but in fact it's clinical data that farmers put in this platform, and that anyone you can do a request and have access to this data. Of course, there is a classical way, so you need to pass through a medical data access committee, etc. But in terms of technology, in fact, once you have access, when you have the right to use, in fact, it's not access, the right to use this data, then you go to this kind of a data server portal. And you cannot, as I said previously, like in our model, you cannot export or copy the data. You can use it, but you cannot have a copy of it. In terms of data subject platform, there are already some data subject platform up and running. In both, at least these two examples, to our knowledge, both are in USA. And also we can leverage on the different infrastructure in Europe, such as Elixir or BBMRI, and of course also in the European high-performance computing centers. So the take-home message of that is if we want to have a high data sharing rate, we need to meet at least three conditions. First, to engage data subject in data sharing and research. Two, to build trust between all the stakeholders. And three, to ensure reciprocity between stakeholders. And we think that the Data Sharing Federation meets these conditions. So before finishing, I would like to thank my colleague in the team of Etrix and also the support from the Ethics and the Security Advisory Board. And special thanks for their input and support from Mark Philippe, Stephanie Dyke, and others from McGill and Global Alliance, the people from BBMRI, so Yann Eric, Peter Gauthier, and also some cryptography people, so Jean-Pierre Hugo in UFL and Damien in Lyon. Also colleagues from Elixir, so Serena Skolan, Tommy from the Finnish Node, and Niklas Mundell, and also very important input from the patient organization, so Melanoma Patient Network Europe, the EFA, and also EPF, and also a special thanks for Comitaran, who is our IMI sponsor. And of course, all this work couldn't be done without the support of Etrix, and in particular IMI and the EFPIA partners. So thank you very much for your attention.
I have a question regarding to the genetic data, which spans generations. It's a perspective, it's a data that can span generations. When you think about the succession of the genetic data, this can bring to a very long discussion here as well, but the direct question is how the data protection framework addresses that the succession could eventually request to remove parents or retrospective data.
The regulation is pretty extended compared to the directive, but it's not complete. And the genetic data is one of the aspects. Why? Because as you just said, I mean, if you release or disclose genetic data, in fact there is a potential harm on the data subject, but also on its relatives. And the relatives could be the children, the grandchildren, okay. And the regulations say that as soon as the person is deceased, then it's not anymore personal data. at least according to the regulation, at least they leave the member state to decide if or not data are still personal data. So there is still let's say, a fuzziness here that how we can handle genetic data, at least for when people are not anymore alive. They are still, and there is still this risk of the relatives.
The concept of natural person doesn't apply when the subject is deceased.
Exactly.